Hey everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. Meat Eater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the Engineer's going to be there. Meat Eater Live headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay? Every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Arts Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula. May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington. May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon. And May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.
Hey, this is Tyler Jones, and you're listening to the Element Podcast. What's happening, all my woods people? I hope you're staying warm. We're pretty warm in this truck right now. Fairly warm. My legs get so cold these days, though.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think it's just these thin pants that
You
I
used
wear.
to say your legs never got cold.
I know. I think it's these thin pants, dude.
Yeah.
I need to put some blue jeans on or something, I guess, instead of these old man windsuits that I wear.
Yeah, bodysuit dickies, man. It's hard to stay warm in them, isn't it?
Yeah. I used to wear those to school in high school sometimes.
Did you?
Yeah.
When you violated dress code?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't really have a dress code. I mean, it's like don't wear your hair to your neck and
I'm out.
No, violence on your shirt or whatever.
Yeah.
So, yeah, dude, it's been cold around here. I mean, 45 is a high. It's freezing around
Tomorrow
here.
the high's 39.
Yeah. Oh, golly.
Man, I know.
I'm gonna hang a deer.
I tell you what, sorry about y'all up there further north is all I can say. 'Cause
Yeah.
I ain't about it.
You should live in Texas. We eat jalapenos in the summer. So I'm going deer hunting here in just a second. So we're gonna keep this pretty light. But I actually there's these things that we get for managed properties from Texas biologists. And I have a connection to somebody who gets to help manage a property, and we get to shoot deer a little bit later than the season goes. So I'm pretty excited about it. I'm going to go try to shoot a doe if they're still out moving around. It's a cold day. It's overcast. So hopefully, even though it's kind of late in the morning, there'll be some moving around. We're going to try to smoke some hogs if we see them. So I might be throwing some back straps on the grill pretty soon.
Oh, boy, howdy.
I'm pretty excited, man. I thought I was just kind of like to the point where I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to have to fish really hard this year to fill my freezer. You know what I mean?
Trot lining.
That's right.
Yeah.
Dude, I'm still going to probably, but hopefully this will give me some red meat to get me through stew season and everything else.
Stew season.
Is that
I like that.
okay?
Yeah, that's
okay,
cool.
Cool.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe stew season already started, but I definitely would eat a stew today. You know what I mean? So, what else going on?
Well, today on the podcast, we have another fellow public land hunter who isn't your, what would you say? He isn't like the guy that you see like, consistently having public land success for the last 20 years from northern Michigan. You know what I mean? Like, he's a real dude, man.
Yeah.
His name's Chad Sylvester from Exodus Outdoor Gear. We actually got to hang out with Chad at ATA some, and really cool, really passionate guy who, like, man, I like Chad's story because it's a story a lot of us can identify with, where like you kind of didn't have your head on straight when you were younger, and then man, this guy is driven and determined now, and it's like he's better for it. Yeah, you know what I mean.
It's cool, man. I mean, that's kind of not to get too preachy, but like in your walk, in your faith, man. That's like the idea is to for me to sin less every day, right?
Yeah.
To be better, and maybe you take a 2 steps back sometimes day to day, but overall, like you try to become better, you try to serve more, and you're becoming a better man as you go through life.
Yeah.
And I think that story on a secular level is very similar. You know?
Yeah, and then he kind of ties it into deer hunting pretty good too.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
like because the sucker's working his tail off on some public land where pretty much deer don't exist.
Yeah.
But there
That's
are
how
some
I feel
giants.
about our properties.
I know.
It's like that going. Like in October, sometimes like there are deer there, in like late October, and then all of a sudden like. You just have this small window where, like, it's so hot, no deer move. And then there's, like, a cool snap in late October, and your cameras light up. And then the rut comes, and you'll see some bucks here and there, but it's super inconsistent. And then there's a guy on your camera, and then you don't see anything else.
That's right, yeah.
You're like, what in the world?
And people rage you for shooting a spike in December. It's like, listen, dudes, if you only understood, like, the
it's actually
rarity.
January.
It was January 1st, wasn't it? Yeah. New Year's Day. Yeah. So that video's out this week.
Yeah.
Launched last week, actually.
People have the support has been good, though.
I know.
Like, I was surprised after the picture that we posted of you smoking a spike. Like, people were just like, had such a problem with it. And even the arrow sticking out of it as if like you didn't shoot it with an arrow or something.
The squeaky wheel gets the grease, like. I feel like maybe we've had a lot of support over that, but just like a couple of sour apples, just like, you're like, really, man? I mean, here's the deal. Like, I shot the deer because I wanted to shoot the deer, and that's the end of the day.
And it was legal.
Yeah.
How about that?
The biologists say you should shoot deer like that, so we're going to shoot deer like that. But anyways, go watch the video because
it's cool.
I'm proud of it, man. Like, it was
a good morning on public.
It was. We both saw a bunch of deer.
We almost both killed 3 deer.
Oh, man.
Like, you had 2 opportunities. I had a big group of deer come in getting chased by a buck that might have been legal, but I couldn't tell if it had little brow tines or not. But, like, they were at 5 yards, and I almost got to kill that morning. And then you killed, and just, it was such a good morning, man. Like, that doesn't happen very often for us on pub. So I was pretty excited. That was a fun video to put together, whereas some of our like PLCs, I'm like, dadgummit, dude, like we had a great morning, but there's like video footage of a doe.
Yeah,
you know
and some brush. That's it.
It's like,
wait, is that a tine? No, it's just a stick.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but there was a really good buck that came like 60 yards from us.
Yeah.
I'm sorry y'all can't see it, So I've enjoyed that. Also, one thing I've been enjoying lately is this duck hunting video that we're gonna put out. That it's weird because we don't talk a whole lot about duck hunting, but I did get to go video one, and there's a really inspiring story that one of the guys that was in the group had and told for this video. So I'm really excited to put that out. Like, kind of getting me back into my film game, you know what I mean? That I've enjoyed so much over the years. So anyway, excited about all that. We're going to talk to Chad about tactics, hunting big woods, public land deer, and maybe some camera tactics as well, because that's pretty natural when you're talking to a guy that knows as much as he does. And like, I don't know if we'll get super detailed for some people on the camera thing, but like Chad can literally he can spit the jargon to where you're like, hey, dude, English, please.
If you wanted to bust open a circuit board, he'd just tell you what's on there. That's what he can do.
Yeah, so he knows it, and maybe we'll do that sometime a little more like detailed, like instead of a 101, it's a 2-parter, or whatever. So
Black Diamond.
Anyway, let's get Chad on, I guess. I don't really know what else to do because I need to go hunting. All right, so now on the phone we have Chad Sylvester from Exodus Outdoor Gear. What's happening, Chad?
Not too much, man. Just enjoying the early morning, getting my day started.
Yeah.
What's going on, fellas?
Not a lot, man. We think we're cold, We don't know the rest of the country. Like, I've got friends, some in the Midwest and stuff like that, and I'll text them about something and be like, hey, what's going on? And they just be like, oh, trying to stay warm. And I'm thinking, me too, but then I realized that y'all's temperatures are like 30 degrees colder than ours are.
And depending on who you talk to, they really like to include the wind chill in there to like over accentuate how bad it is. Oh yeah, dude, it's like negative 70 today. No, it's not.
Yeah. It's like, come on, we can't talk in wind chills here.
Yeah, that's true, man. That's true.
Anyway, so you guys are, in the middle of this cold, dreary season where we're just like not able to hunt much at all, really. I've seen some guys hunting rabbits. We've hunted squirrels and small game a little bit, but as far as deer hunting goes, which is kind of the main point of this podcast, it's pretty bleak out there right now. You guys have just actually released a new camera. How's that going for you?
Good, man. We just launched the Exodus Render there. It's been about 2 weeks now, which is our Verizon cellular device, a Verizon 4G LTE device that runs off the Verizon network. So yeah, man, it's excited. We've been working on that for since 2017. So it's nice to finally have that come to market and get that off our shoulders and get some feedback from the public, and all that's been phenomenal. And it's kind of cool this time of year to have a product launch because, as you said, the deer woods are kind of closing down and there's not much excitement. I mean, shed season's right around the corner, but, to have a new product out and have feedback and kind of keep that excitement going, all year round for the deer woods is pretty cool. So.
Yeah, for sure, man. That's good. That's good. So you and we got to speak at ATA quite a bit, and kind of realized we have similar background in the fact that we played college football, not together, but we both played. And can you kind of take us back to maybe college football days, some of the lessons you might have learned, and then just kind of drive us through your story and tell us how you got to where you're at today working with Exodus?
Yeah, man. It was, I grew up in a super small town. As you said, a lot, very similar to you. I'm a town of 1,200 people, super small school, and was really a pretty good athlete growing up in high school. Played safety and tailback, and won some accolades coming through school, and really was recruited on the national level. A lot of major college football programs, and I guess going through that process, I kind of, coming from such a small school where that was really not the norm of having an athlete or someone gaining so much attention. I mean, there were college coaches coming in to watch us practice, and I'd be pulled from class once or twice a week to meet with a recruiting coordinator or a coach. And I kind of was tailored to, by the faculty, the high school faculty, to a point where, I kind of got a little cocky, I guess you could say. And really thought like everyone, like the world, I guess was owed me something. But to make a long story short, yeah, I ended up playing Division I AA ball at Youngstown State. And when I went there, it was really an eye-opening experience. I wasn't really focused on education, I guess you could say. I was there to play football, and that was kind of my thing. I had dreams of from a little boy is growing up and trying to make it to the league, and that's kind of what my focus was on, was just solely football. But when I went there, kind of had a chip on my shoulder because I had got recruited by all these big schools, and for one reason or another, I didn't sign or didn't have any offers at some of the major college football programs where I thought I was going to end up. And so when I ended up at a 1AA school, I felt like I was kind of above everybody on the team. Went in, got redshirted as a freshman. Again, I got recruited to play safety, but I was, my feet weren't really all that great and I didn't have the hip work, so I ended up playing linebacker. Lettered as a redshirt freshman, and then as a sophomore, I was actually starting. I was slated to start as a sophomore, and some injuries happened through camp or whatnot, and they wanted to move me to play inside linebacker I was a seam player. So I was a force player playing the outside. And then also in a nickel package, played nickel package. And when they wanted to move me into the inside, I was just like, you know what? Like, I'm not big enough to play in the inside. I'm 6'1", 230. Like, yeah, I got good speed, but this, I'm not gonna. If I have a chance to play in the league, I'm not gonna be able to play in the inside. I'm too small. And took to that mentality, and really, I just felt like the coaches were trying to screw me over. That I was just really being really damn selfish, and a lot of that mindset came from some of the people I was hanging around with. Felt like again, like the world owed me something. I wasn't focused on sacrificing for the team, and I was just worried about myself. And ultimately that led me to walking away, just walked away from the team, continued, on the education side, but, with my focus being on football and not really academics, that was pretty short lived. And, the mentality that I had there, I can almost accredit that to where I am today, because that was a lesson that I've learned over the last, I don't know, probably 10 years, is just being the capacity mentally to be tough enough to go through hardships and the trials and tribulations and struggles, and knowing that, things won't always be perfect, but you still have to do the work every single day, have a great attitude, because somewhere in the world, no matter how bad you have it, someone else has it worse.
Right. Yep.
So, those lessons really have brought me, I guess, kind of what I deploy in my daily here at Exodus. And, we talk about building company culture or corporate culture. That's, that stems from the lessons I learned 10 years ago or 15 years ago. So, and that wasn't an overnight process either. There was from the time that I stopped playing football, I never really wanted to have a corporate 9 to 5. That was never my interest. So never wanted to really go to work for anyone else. Always had an entrepreneurial mindset. And
did the rodeo thing for a while, didn't you?
Yes, that's what I was getting ready to say. So really, when I was 22, I didn't really want to go to work for anybody. So I pursued a professional rodeo career in a PRCA and PBR until I was 28, 29. And then, from there went to work for an engineering firm that my father owned, worked there for a few years. Then I left and did a short stint in the telecommunications, working with AT&T and Verizon with an A&E firm, and which I absolutely hated. Like, I was in a cubicle in a desk job.
Yeah. But look at you now. You get to now you're developing a cell camera. So
that's
probably helped you, huh?
Oh, there's no doubt about it. Just having the background and just the familiarity with how those companies operate, and their technology, and how that stuff actually works was a giant help. Bring that render project to market. But just those short 2 years in that 9 to 5 is really what kind of led me to say, hey, I gotta get the hell out of here and do something for myself. And that's kind of what led to the start of Exodus. It's
cool, man. So a couple of things from that story that I would make statements about, I guess. First, people see this ESPN perspective of college sports, and man, it is tough to be a college athlete. It's not as glorious as it looks. And I'll also say this, and this makes us sound like some old men, but like even 10 years ago, playing football was different than it is today. Practicing every day, like, you still hit and you still went head to head and you had headaches all the time. Whereas today it's a little more high sock, fly around and don't hit anybody too hard in practice. And it started becoming that way, even in my latter years of playing. But just that, just grind of kind of that hard nose aching all the time, and then, struggling to through injuries and through not being where you want to be and that kind of thing. And man, you're like 19 years old, you know, like you just don't know any better than to just kind of like be selfish and be, you know, kind of rebellious, I guess. And so like just to kind of, I guess, relate to what you're saying and to also throw that out there, I think that it's really good that you have come from that and you have been molded into something different, because like, you know, we're constantly supposed to be molded into something better, right? Every day we're looking to be a better version of ourselves. And I think that's kudos to you for doing that, you know. And despite not getting the education maybe you wanted, I also have noticed that you're really well spoken, and you're not like some dumb meathead. So that's why I like talking to you. You know what I mean? Because you know the dumb meatheads I'm talking about that walked around the locker room, right? You know what I mean? And so I can appreciate that about you, and that's one reason we wanted to have you on the podcast, was to give us some non-meathead talk about football.
Well, I appreciate the compliment. And it's funny, you know, when you talk about being 18, 19, 20 years old and making that jump from, you know, high school to college and the athletic world, you know, the maturity level, it's just, you know, it's not, for most people, it's not there. And for the guys that it is there, you know, those are the guys that are really, I guess, doing something special, the 1%ers of the world. But, you know, coming full circle, I mean, I find myself, I don't watch TV. I said, you know, if I have free time at night, I'm reading books, or I'm reading articles, you know, on the internet, and trying to educate myself inside of the marketplace that I kind of, that runs my life, which is the outdoor and hunting industry. So, I mean, it does come full circle. I think, unfortunately for me, it just took till I was 30 years old to hit that maturity level.
That's all right, dude. That's all right, man. Yeah. It's good that you got there.
I, you know, we've talked before. I don't really have the college football side of things going on, but like my story kind of parallels just academically, where coming out of high school, I had a lot of, you know, partial and full scholarship offers academically. I scored a 31 on my ACT. I didn't have a great GPA, but I had a really high ACT score. And had the same thing going, where I felt like the world owed me a free education. You know what I mean? And just left and completely underachieved. And I didn't have the maturity level to fit like that intellect to where I didn't try at all. You know, and I do a little preaching on the side. So I preached a lesson the other day about oak trees and about how different acorns take different processes to get to a full grown, big, beautiful oak tree. And I kind of compared my walk and my life with that of like a red oak that has to go through a stratification process, to where I can't just hit the ground and germinate and grow real big like a white oak can. You know, I got to go through like a cooling process or through a little bit of trial and tribulation to get where you are. And I don't know, maybe the wood from trees like that's a little stouter. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's cool, man. I guess that's kind of a good way to get into what we were really wanting to talk about, deer hunting. And you hunt primarily in Ohio, correct?
Yeah, that's, you know, born and raised in Ohio. I have hunted some different states, but primarily, you know, Ohio is my home whitetail state, for sure. So, and you hunt a lot of public land these days. You've told me it's challenging, but it's by choice and it's not like a necessity. Some guys like to talk about hunting public land as a necessity, and sometimes it is kind of a necessity. Maybe it's also that they didn't work as hard at getting permission properties or whatever. But explain how you got to the point of now where you're hunting public land, your focus there. Yeah, so I guess the common thing in my life, and again, this relates back to football and the trials, tribulations, the struggles, the failures, is being in love with the process, not the end goal. So that's like my common theme, whether I'm hunting, whether I'm at work on you know, doing my daily, if it's, you know, I'm spending time with my family, I'm in love with the process. And if you're not in love with the process, you're going to struggle throughout your entire life and you're never going to be happy. So just, that's kind of the baseline for everything that I do. So growing up, I grew up in a hunting family, but not a family of serious hunters. It was more of a tradition. The week of gun season, everyone would take a few days off work. Everybody hit the woods, and that was celebrated, which that's an awesome thing. But at the very young age of 13, I guess 12 or 13 is really when I started gun hunting. On a family farm, my grandfather, a farm that's been in my family since my great grandfather owned. So almost 500 continuous acres of prime whitetail habitat. I mean, we weren't in the food plots and things of that nature or the management side of things back in the mid 90s, but there were large ag fields, high stem count cover. There's some mature timber, just a beautiful farm the way it laid out. So at the young age of 16, I was able I killed my first buck, and that deer grossed 177 inches.
Oh my God.
The very
first deer. Yeah. So the very first deer I killed, was an absolute giant.
Ugh.
And again, I got a ton of attention from that. Everyone, there's a big write up in the newspaper article, and, my family was going nuts. And, so from that point on, I was like, this is awesome. Like, I just need to replicate this every year. So I started bow hunting the following year at 17 years old. And let me tell you, I made every dang mistake you possibly make with a bow in your hands. I mean, everything. Missing deer, I've wounded deer, been busted from top to bottom, made every mistake you can possibly make. But over the course of the next, 10 years, from 17 to, 20, 26, 27, it got to a point where I was hunting that farm, and almost anybody coming in off the street could go sit in a pinch point or, downwind of a doe bedding area during a rut and kill a good deer. It was like every year somebody was coming in and killing, 160, 170, 180 inch deer. It was, and I'm not saying that it was easy, because it's definitely not easy, and it was never guaranteed. But as long as you did things, the right way, you watched the wind, you spent a little time scouting, you ran some cameras, your odds were pretty good that you were going to kill, a solid whitetail. And I had an opportunity to go out west with my grandfather on an elk hunt, and that really changed the way I looked at hunting whitetails, in the Midwest. When we went to Southwest Colorado and hunted in the Uncapodre National Forest, giant, just huge, vast tract of land. Anybody that's has spent any time out west knows, just the beauty of the landscape and the vastness, and you almost feel like you've been in areas where no other human has really set foot on ever. Of course that's not the case, but that's what it makes you feel like. Right. You get romantic about that idea.
Yeah.
And I found myself after an unsuccessful hunt, but nonetheless, we were out there to make memories and whatnot with my grandfather. So when I came back that year to the whitetail woods, I found myself sitting in that woodlot, and I could hear dogs bark, and I could hear cars, and I could see the barn light come on in the evening time. And it just was like, what the heck am I doing here? Like, my mind kept going back to Colorado and, hunting those big woods, adventure style hunting. So I ended up capping that year off with 167 inch typical. and like, it was the third sit. It was my third sit during the rut. It was like November 10th or November 11th. And I had been in the woods for 2 hours. Came in, made a good shot. Deer went 40 yards, dropped, and like my season was over. And I was like, there has to be something. There's got to be something more to this than what I'm doing here. And I came across a short film called Pursuing the Allegheny, where these three guys were taking this Western adventure style hunting and doing it in Pennsylvania in the Allegheny National Forest. So I was kind of intrigued that, how they were doing that. And I instantly fell in love with the idea and was like, well, how can I do that in Ohio? So I started looking at giant tracts of the biggest public land tracts I could find. So 4 or 5 years ago, I guess it was 5 years ago, I started hunting a 60,000 acre tract of big woods next to zero structure in hill country, very few roads. And I just fell in love with that entire process. Again, it was a process of going in there and doing things in such a hard manner. Not that I wanted to do something anyone else, couldn't do, or it was just about testing myself, and growing personally as a hunter. So I've been doing that for 4 or 5 years now. I've been unsuccessful. I have not killed a buck there in 4 years. It's kind of a running joke inside of our company. People are like, well, how do you run a trail camera company and, you can't kill a deer in your home state? So
do you feel closer though today than you did 5 years ago?
Oh my gosh. I'm after, going from hunting that manicured ag farm to hunting big woods public. I'm 10 times the hunter than I was, hunting that farm.
Yeah.
Just boots on the ground scouting, be able to read terrain, knowing how those deer navigate in such vast pieces of land, and really hunting them on their own movement. I mean, there's next to zero influence there. I mean, you're hunting deer on their natural movements, how they were, 100 years ago.
Right.
So it's really cool.
Do you feel like, you said you worked the 9 to 5 for just a little bit, right? And then just got just enough taste for it that you said that's not for you. Do you feel like the private land thing is kind of the deer hunter's 9 to 5, where it's easy, it's comfortable, and you can have some success, and it's okay if that's what you want to do with your life, but there's also the other side of it too?
I think so. You could say that.
Yeah.
I think it's probably different for everyone.
Yeah.
Because I will tell you this, after 4 years or 5 years of not filling a tag, I mean, my thoughts do go back and hunting private ag ground. I'll tell you that.
I hear you, man.
So I think it's probably it's different for everyone. I don't think people define success in the same manner, obviously. So it's just personal preference, I guess.
So speaking of the process, can you kind of take us through the process, your scouting process? Like what has made you, where did you start when you first started hunting that 50,000 acre tract? And then how has your process evolved to the point of today where you said that you feel a lot better hunter, that you're a lot closer to killing one of these big public land bucks? What does your process look like as far as scouting, getting closer to that, hunting even? What does that process look like?
Well, it started with digital scouting, reading, topo maps, and doing a little bit of research on forums, but figuring out areas that had less pressure, where I could get away from people was really the focus when I started. And then what I found was, that very first season, that's what everyone else is doing. Everyone else is reading topographical maps. They're looking for saddles and benches and those major terrain features where it would pinch down deer. And regardless of how far it was from a road, almost everyone in that area, anyone that goes to that area and hunts in Ohio is willing to put in the work. So I actually was doing myself a disservice by looking at those major saddles and benches and draws and drainages, because that's where everyone else is going there. So after a year of running cameras there, I quickly realized the bigger deer that we had on camera, and we were running, again, we had just started this company, and we were running, at that time, we probably had 50 cameras there. And I'm going to say we've probably focused on 4,000 or 5,000 acres out of that 50,000. And quickly realized those deer in those big woods have way longer of movement. So their bed to food pattern was a lot longer. It was a little more sporadic because they could bed and feed anywhere. So after running 50 cameras for that year, we noticed there was a pattern that would happen. Certain deer would hole up in areas for 3 or 4 days, whether that was based on food or whether that was based on bedding due to extreme weather or even around the rut. So the following year, we were able to use that data, that annual trail camera data, and actually put ourselves in position, to get on some deer, which, painstakingly saying, I'm running all those cameras. You get really, I guess I've had a bad habit of getting romantic about killing really big deer. Like it's been like that since I've been 16. And unfortunately that second year I was there, you let some deer walk that I probably shouldn't have let walk.
Like what kind of deer? Explain for the listener what that might look like.
Like a 4-year-old 130, like just a nice, a great public land deer, a great deer anywhere, regardless of public, private, whatever. I let 2 deer walk that year, two separate deer that I probably should have let an arrow fly. But, hindsight's 2020. I thought I was, I've had the confidence in myself that I was going to be able to put myself on a bigger deer, and it just was never the case. And actually I spent 3 consecutive years there hunting a single deer on 60,000 acres, which is pretty, it's damn near impossible. It was tough. But at the same time, the guy I was hunting with was doing the same thing, and he was able to capitalize that. So 3 years in a row, he hunted 160-inch typical 9-point. And that third year he shot that deer, which I actually filmed that hunt, shot him 5 feet from the base of his tree.
Oh, man.
It was incredible.
I bet.
Incredible.
Golly, that's awesome, dude. So as far as we'll get into some of these details, but I feel like that, I guess, first of all, it's, to me, could you set up kind of like what the area looks like? You've maybe talked about it, but like, so it's kind of hill country, I guess. What kind of trees? Is it rocky? Is it sandy? How does all that look?
Yeah, and with that, can you explain what hill country is for y'all? Because we have a region in Texas that's hill country that I don't think is anything like what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay, yeah. So when I describe hill country, it's a lot like it's really the foothills of the Appalachians, that run through much of the east side of the part of the country. Mm-hmm. Elevation change anywhere from up 400 to 600 feet. Very steep hills. And I say steep, they're hard. It's tough to walk. You got to be in pretty decent shape. So like a 1-to-1 slope for 45 degrees is not uncommon there. Very short ridges. So, for people who are maybe listening from like West Virginia or Kentucky or even New York, Pennsylvania, hill country or mountainous regions there have, they can get on a ridge and walk for a mile or two sometimes. And in Southern Ohio, that's just not the case. You might have a ridge that's 500 or 600 feet and that's it. So very, very rugged terrain. As far as soil conditions, it is a little bit rocky, but there's not like a bunch of like rocky outcrops or like sheer bluffs or anything of that nature. And for the most part, a lot of it's open hardwoods. Mm-hmm. So, not a lot of pine growth. Now there are areas of timber management that the state actually, manages. So there's a lot of clear cuts with like some super really high stem count with, a lot of that regrowth. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of, and again, it's with 60,000 acres. I know that's kind of broad. I mean, if you break it down into 1,000-acre chunks, every 1,000 acres is a little bit different, but
yeah, sure.
Super rugged, steep hills, short ridges, and open hardwoods is.
So is like what kind of hardwoods? Oaks,
hickories, maple trees, but yeah, a ton of white oaks.
Yeah.
Some reds.
So in that situation, when you've got a ton of white oaks, and we run into this problem a lot here, we've got pretty much red oaks a lot of time where we hunt, and we're still looking for the white oak tree in a lot of areas that we hunt. We're like right on the line, like where we hunt private and public a lot. And then if you go east of here, 60 miles, you're going to be in white oak country pretty much. So, but my point is, we have a lot of, we'll have like one of our more preferred oaks is a red oak called the Shumard oak in a lot of areas we hunt. And so like you can go to a certain property, public or private, and not have any Shumards. And then you can go to a certain 200 acre place that has tons of Shumards on it. And so, if it doesn't have Shumards on it, it'll be probably like, smaller, post oak acorns, or, we have, these willow and swamp oaks that have these real small, really red, orange acorns that fall, in hordes. And so like one thing that we have kind of struggled with is like, how do you key in on, obviously it's a food source and they're hammering them, but how do you key in a big woods situation, which is kind of what we encounter on a certain, do you have to just get lucky and say, well, I know there are things, but what are the things that you key in on to find, well, that's the white oak tree today, or this year or whatever.
Right. Well, I think when there's a large mass crop, it's really hard because those deer in big woods can pretty much go anywhere and be on a food source, or, they can bed anywhere and be relatively close to a food source. So they may not be moving as much, during daylight hours. So in the early season with those white oaks, it's really, really tough. We try to use this historical data, and relate to historical bedding and get on those white oak flats that are relatively, within 150, 200 yards of early season bedding, which is typically, even though it is wind related, a lot of times what we find is those deer will be on those north slopes, early in the season, up on that upper 1/3, still trying to use, the wind, use that thermal and wind tunnel to their advantage on that upper 1/3. But a lot of times they're on the northern side on those points, on those short ridges in the early season. In the late season, I actually, which in the big woods for us, it's a lot easier to find those food sources in the late season because they're just a lot less of them in that area. So we'll find chinkapins, in the late season, and you can almost guarantee if it's dropping acorns, deer will hole up there for 3 or 4 days. And it's just a matter of being able to time that, every year to be able to kind of move in there and have an opportunity, which again, historically is, coming from trail camera data. But the one thing I would note is, when guys are out in the season scouting, take your binoculars and look for that stuff.
Yeah.
I think that's something that's a lost art in today's world. Everyone's so worried about, sitting over an ag field or a fancy food plot. I think some of that stuff is lost. So
Yeah.
So you just talked about the early and late season. Can you tell me like where the line of delineation is between those two and like what months that is for you?
Yeah, early season for us is anything prior to, well, what I consider, everybody probably have their own take on this, but prior to like October 21st.
Okay.
Really before that kind of pre-rut where, you're really starting to see scrapes and stuff open up.
Yeah.
And then I would say after the weekend of Thanksgiving. So really after, we'll call it December 1st, moving all the way to the end of the season is where we start to focus on those late season food sources.
Yeah, I got you. So you're kind of just talking about the times when testosterone is affecting the deer less, pretty much is what you're like early season and late season. And then most of November and then a little bit of the outside of the bell curve there is kind of the rut where it falls outside of those.
Right.
So you touched on something pretty cool there, and there's like Tyler and I like to talk about this a lot. There's this like food plot movement that's been going on since probably the 90s, right? And this whole like romanticizing the idea of well cultivated food plots and how great they are for all wildlife and this and that, and that very well may be true, but there's something about the fact that these animals did just fine without the food plots for thousands of years, right? And
right.
You touched on something huge with the binoculars and looking at the acorns and stuff. And I think I'm a oak nut as of the last year. I really have been not an acorn, but an oak nut. I've really got into it, man. And there's like when you start looking at things people like to say that, well, acorns only encompass just a little part of a deer's diet, like, they're not there for very long. That's not really true. You've got trees that are dropping acorns from September to almost February in some parts of the country, but from September to at least December, that's the whole fall. That's when we're hunting. So why not concentrate on that? And have you found that you can pattern deer off of which species of oak tree is putting off that month or that week?
Well, I don't know if we've looked at it on that deep of a level.
Yeah.
Just to be totally honest, I'm not super good with my subspecies. I do know a few sawtooth, a few different white oaks and a few different red oaks.
Yeah.
But to break it down by the week, no. I wish I had that capabilities, and maybe that's something I should probably work on, especially if with my focus being on the big woods. But
yeah,
no, I've never had the ability or the mindset to do that, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you were speaking about this earlier, and you hear a lot about this, I guess, in the media. But in that hill country that you hunt, are you? And I think you are, but are you using elevation to steer winds in different directions? Or are you trying to find areas to hunt that are like the wind is a pretty consistent direction as to what the weatherman says?
Yeah, the wind is, that was the biggest learning curve for me coming from flat ag to hill country, is understanding the wind and thermals, because regardless of what the weatherman says, the wind is never going to, at least from what I found, the wind is never going to be accurate with what the wind direction on the weather forecast.
Right.
The ridges there they're too steep and they're too short. So you could look at your weather app on your phone and it could be calling for a west wind, and you get to your spot and that wind might be coming from the northeast because the way it's wrapping around a point. So for us, I almost create like so I use OnX Maps a lot. So I have pins dropped in different areas of interest, I guess. And really, I don't know what the wind's going to do until I get in there and drop some milkweed to see exactly, how the thermals are affecting it, how, the different points and ridges or saddles are affecting it. And that's a big part of really understanding that. It's a big part of how I've been accessing a lot of those stand locations, is because you can cheat the wind if you understand what it's doing, and use those terrain features, and have your wind or scent blow into areas where deer or think deer are not going to be. So it not only plays a big part in the actual stand time, but it plays a big part in access and entry and exit routes.
So do you have a setup that you like to go with consistently, that you see the wind behave? Like you can go look at a topo and say, I think the wind's going to behave like this here, and that sets up well for the style that I hunt or whatever.
I don't know that there's like a cookie cutter answer to that. What I can say is that understanding thermals, and knowing when you can hunt bottoms and when you need to be up in the tops, when your scent's going to drop, when it's going to be rising. On those days where it's like you have next to zero wind, so it's super, super calm, maybe a high pressure day like Bluebird Day, I do like to get in those bottoms where your thermals, you're going to have that lift, and things are just going to, everything's going to be shooting straight up. Now, on top of that, if you can get into an area where there's moving water, that can be a huge, huge advantage. Not only to use, to suck your thermals and watch your thermals and scent, follow that stream of water, that flowing water, but also as a barrier, depending on, how fast that water is moving or how deep it is. It's almost like having a barricade, on one side of your set.
Yeah, for sure.
So can you explain that, like how the moving, like why is it important that the water's moving?
Well, yeah, the faster the water is moving, typically if the water is moving, it's going to carry carry your scent in that direction, there's going to be an air current over top of that water. Okay. So you have flowing water, and then there's actually an air current on top of that that's actually flowing in that same direction of the water. The colder the water, the better, because it's going to have a harder suck, and it's going to pull your thermals, pull your scent even faster down close to that water, and then it's going to carry everything away in that direction.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
That's cool. So, and then also that water speed, I guess, could deter an animal from trying to swim across or walk across that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. So, I guess I should have asked you this earlier, but is there a key factor or two that you like to key in on when you hunt? You know, some guys like rubs, some guys love scrapes, some guys like the rut because it's unpredictable and you never know if a giant's going to walk by you. Is there some kind of factor that you really look for when you're out there scouting?
Yeah, I do like, I love primary scrapes. So big community scrapes that are there all year round and that are in relation to heavy cover. Because in the areas that we hunt, the deer density is super, super low. I mean, I think we've talked about that at the ATA show when we first chatted, but maybe 1.2, 1.3, 1.4 deer per square mile. I mean, there's not a lot of deer.
Yeah.
And what we find is those deer will hit scrapes in daylight, but that typically primary scrapes close to bedding, that's in relation to cover. And we've seen that year over year with, the amount of cameras that we run. So those are areas that we do like to focus on. And then also secondary terrain features. And what I mean by secondary is, going back to reading topographical maps, everybody wants to get in those big pinches and those big deep saddles or those real nice benches that, that are really easily seen from a topo map. But when you go in there and walk some of those areas, I've found secondary trails, maybe a little bit lower on that bench or a little bit higher on that bench, or a saddle that's maybe not as defined, and then hanging cameras in those areas. And we actually have more pictures of bigger deer using those secondary terrain features than those primary terrain features. And I think that is related to just having a bad experience over, if that deer is 4 or 5 years old, at some point he's used those major terrain features and had some kind of negative encounter, whether that's with a predator or human or whatever. So those are really the two big things that I look for.
Yeah. It's funny that you're talking about this a few times, and you've alluded to it several times. That it's something that I think did a pretty good job of this year as opposed to the last year or two is, if we, as we're learning some of these properties or these public lands here in Texas, we'll, especially if it's a newer property, we'll in the first couple of years we started doing this together, we would be like, oh, look, you can see that there's two different types of trees, and that kind of makes a funnel right there, or whatever. And we'd go in there for a morning hunt, and the sun would come up, and there'd be 2 stands and then a set of, spikes put into another tree or something like that. And we're like, dadgummit, everybody's seen this, Yeah. And I think this year we did a lot better. We had we hunted an area actually that was KC had found through some boot scouting. That was a really great funnel. Unfortunately, there was some hunter pressure in there that kind of knocked the whole game in a different direction in November. But in October, our cameras were just lit up, So I think that's a really good point that you make there is that, as many, and I hate to say this, but as many cell cams as you have, you still got to get out there and boot scout, and because things change year to year and you can't see everything through a camera or through a map, an aerial or a topo. It's a good point, man.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Yeah. The thing with, public is there's so many variables. I mean, you can get data from a camera, but unless you're asking yourself when, where, and why that deer is actually there. And sometimes you don't have all those answers if you're not able to run a vast number of cameras. If you're only running 3 or 4 cameras, sometimes you can't answer all those questions. So that data can be misleading as far as why, certain deer were in a certain area or at what time of the year. And, trying to eliminate those variables, trying to eliminate human pressure or all of, anything you can't, that's outside of your control, trying to eliminate that stuff only leads to your success. So as you said, the boots on the ground scouting in real time, like there is no substitute for that. People, I think, get consumed with running cameras and getting pictures of deer, which is great, but that should be in addition to putting the work in on the ground and being able to read that sign in real time for yourself.
Yeah. I want to move in the same direction with that, but before we get too far from the community scrape thing, can you kind of define what the size of and what a community scrape looks like? Because we have smaller deer down here, so I don't know. A lot of our scrapes are, some of them look better than others, but none of them are really. I haven't noticed that they're much bigger a lot of times around here, than another one. Is it typically a community scrape a larger diameter?
Yeah, I mean, most of what we see, generally speaking, most of those community scrapes will be at least 2.5, 3 feet in diameter, I guess. All of them will have a really hard worked licking branch, overhanging, and they're used just about, mostly worked for 12 months out of the year. So not just revolving around the rut or pre-rut, but those deer, typically use those in correlation to bedding 24/7. So, and not only by, not always by mature deer, sometimes they're younger deer. A lot of times does are hitting those. So, it's just I guess, communication or focal point, in correlation to bedding and cover.
Yeah.
During like the off months, I guess that's what you call them. Like say in May, are deer actually scraping, or are they just working the licking branch?
Most of the time, they're just working the licking branch.
Yeah.
And so you can see if they've worked that licking branch. I mean, does it look like a dead branch, or sometimes can you see like new parts that have been, I guess browsed or chewed on, or however they might break it off? Can you see that new break, or is it you just have to assume that this is a community scrape? I found this in the fall because it was open, but they're still using it, but they're just rubbing glands on it or something. Or is there actually visual evidence to that?
Yeah, the visual evidence is there's a lot less because most of the time the ground's not being worked up as much. But we're proving that with cameras. So we see a large scrape like that coming across in correlation to bedding, and we put a camera there. Mm-hmm. So, and then we have a photo or video evidence of those deer coming in and using that 12 months out of the year. So that's mostly where that comes from.
How far from bedding are you liking those to be?
Typically within 50 to 100 yards. So something where a deer is going to get up out of his bed and move there in daylight in transition before he goes to, his primary food source or staging area, in the evening hours. So
gotcha.
Yeah. 50 to 100 yards typically.
Cool. So how right now in February, here coming up before the deer shed, how are you using this, cameras to collect data that you can use to kill a buck next year, right here in February in the postseason?
Well, I think the biggest thing right now in the postseason is, just getting data on what deer have made it through the season and what kind of shape they're in. Mm-hmm. So, like through this past year, there are several deer on my hit list. And Jake, I guess we've talked about several deer in our podcast and kind of the story of them either making it or not making it through the season. And now this is just confirming, hey, this deer's still alive. Let's go back and really dive into the data that we've gathered from him for the year and build on that. And there's no guarantees. It's only February. That deer could live for 2 more months, get hit by a car, and be done. But at least at this point, you can say, hey, this deer's made it. Let's have another go around with him for next year.
I got you. So that's more important than actually finding something that they're doing or an area that they're using right now, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, what we find in the big woods, those deer hole up for a few days, and their movements are so sporadic that you can focus like on late season food sources, but that may change for next year. So, the trail camera data on the trail camera end of things, that's really the only thing that we're using cameras for this time of year. That and see when they're actually shedding.
Yeah.
But then going in and boots on the ground, if you're doing some postseason scouting now, you can look at the habitat change or maybe other outside influences that may shift or move those deer out of those areas, or access at different access routes, or maybe there's new pressure added, things of that nature. But as far as on the camera end, it's really just to know which deer have made it through and when they're shedding.
Mm-hmm. So, kind of speaking of that, during the season, I guess relate this to season scouting, but hunter pressure during the season can affect, can essentially move a buck. We saw it this year move a what you would call a target buck for that area out completely. And then you've got forestry and several other factors that can cause deer to just move out of an area. So make a case for me why running cameras on public is a good idea. And then further tell me how actual hunting season info can help us out 10 or 12 months later during the next season.
Well, the biggest thing with running cameras on public is historical data. And I'm speaking of, I guess, traditional SD card cameras. It is so scary that, and this is, some people might find this hard to believe, but we've run a large number, between 50 and 100 cameras on public land for 4 or 5 years, and keeping tabs on specific deer, trying to hunt specific deer, on a 60,000 acre tract. We have seen year over year that deer will hole up in the same areas a year later, plus or minus, 3 days before, 3 days after. And that might not always be on the same exact camera, but he might be 100 yards down the ridge, or maybe on the next ridge over. But and that's with all things being equal. So that's, as you mentioned, habitat, other outside influences as hunter intrusion or hunter pressure, forestry management, all of that remaining the same. It's scary how consistent these deer are doing the same things year over year. And as you run cameras for multiple years and those deer actually become a little bit older, the pattern even becomes more defined as those deer get older. Now they're a lot smarter and a lot wiser, a lot more weary, and a lot of times harder to kill, but the pattern itself actually becomes more defined as you create those data logs over multiple years.
Cool. So what about the person who doesn't like the idea of hunting a specific deer? They, not that they don't want to kill a big buck, but that they would rather see more deer or something like that, as opposed to, I'm going to hunt this specific J-hook trail that goes into this bed on this buck. What should they look for in a spot? And, are there those spots that you can just kind of go, well, that's a spot that deer, knowing what I know about animals and what I know about whitetails in specific, that there's going to be deer there, and quite possibly bucks are going to use that trail. I mean, is that a rut situation mainly?
I think if in the big woods, probably if guys are, if they're the type of guys that like to see a lot of deer, I would say that's going to probably revolve around the rut. And for me, that would be, food sources and related to doe bedding and some type of pinch point in between is kind of what I would put my focus on. And then on a strategy end, a lot of the stuff that we speak about, we understand guys aren't going to run 50 cameras or 100 cameras. That's, there aren't a whole lot of people in the world that are going to do that. But if you have 4 or 5 cameras even, and you're running them on public, there's a great opportunity there to cast a broad net. And what I mean by that is placing one camera on a primary food source and start to gathering data on maybe not a specific deer, but deer in general. And then being able to, almost like how a fisherman casts a net, out into the water and just scoop up fish, that you're basically doing the same thing with cameras, creating a radius with, 3 or 4 cameras, and then kind of leapfrogging them camera over camera to kind of put yourself in a position where, okay, maybe you're getting a deer close to daylight, where you may have an opportunity to go in and make a move. So you're saying if you have 3 cameras and you've got them in a line on a trail
or I guess you could say on a line, but in some sort of fashion in a certain direction towards food source, that as you pick a deer up on one camera coming from a certain direction from your other camera, you can just take that and leapfrog the camera that picks him up the latest in the evening and move it back on the other side of the camera until you find him, which trail he's coming from to the other camera, I guess, if that's not confusing enough. And so just keep leapfrogging it back until you find these deer and work all the way. Do you work all the way to his bed?
No, I wouldn't say you want to work all the way to his bed. I guess the easiest way to explain it is it's a lot like, you hear about old timers cutting tracks and backtracking deer,
Mm-hmm.
like backtracking them into their beds, or guys going out and cutting fresh tracks in snow and really trying to locate and figure out how those deer are moving or navigating. Essentially, you're doing the same things, but you're doing it with cameras. Now, what I would say is I typically would leave the camera that's on the primary food source where you're getting pictures of him. I would leave that camera there just to make sure that deer is still alive and that's an area that he's still frequenting, and then use those second tier cameras to kind of leapfrog camera over camera to get him close to daylight. We don't like to put a lot of pressure on beds. It's just, you spend so much time out of the year working and trying to put yourself in a position to put yourself on an animal. It's so easy to mess it up and bump a deer, and then having to go find him is a giant pain in the butt. And I've been there, we've done that. So my thought is to be a little more conservative. And then when you're getting that deer, if you have a couple pictures of him that are close to daylight or close to shooting hours, just wait for the weather and wait for those, wait for, a temp drop or a big change in wind speed or anything like that, that may get him on his feet just a little bit sooner. And then make your move.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So, we're pretty close. Here in Texas, it's different. A lot of people are talking, you see all these posts about people like, are they dropping around you yet? And I'm like, oh, they are not dropping here. But in other places, especially with this cold weather, I'm sure deer are starting to drop. How are you, able to use cameras to decide what time is the most effective time to go pick sheds before green up?
So right now we're using cell cams on food sources and just monitoring, when at least 50 or 60% of those deer have dropped. I mean, deer have been dropping here for a couple of weeks now, whether that's due to the photo period or, the added stress of season, predators, hunting pressure. Maybe they've been injured, all of that. The stress levels do play a part of how early they shed, on top of the photo period. But yeah, right now just using cell cameras in those primary food areas. And then we're so damn busy. Like we're not going to go out and, hike miles and miles and miles every weekend, pick one or two sheds up. We're going to wait till the majority of those deer have dropped. And then we'll make, 2 weekends we'll go walk.
Yeah.
And I will admit I'm probably the world's worst shed hunting.
Dude, I don't know. I might give you a run for your money.
I'm lucky if I pick 2 or 3 up a year. Like it's pretty bad.
Well, that's cool. So we're in the same boat there. KC's like literally Mr. Eagle Eye. Like he could probably smell them, I think. I'm not sure.
I've got a big nose. I think it helps.
Yeah.
So what's the tip? Well, what's your strategy, man? Just keep your eyes on the ground or what?
Yeah, I don't pay enough attention to like the live deer. I'm looking for just the sheds instead. So, I don't know, man. I just have been lucky this past season. I mean, we'd be, in a pretty high, high
he walks
stress.
in front of me a lot too because he's a good navigator. I think he's got like a photographic memory, and so I don't know. This is my observation, and so I think that because I'll notice we'll be walking through like what you would consider the big woods, lots of greenbrier and stuff, where like you could go through this patch of greenbrier, you could go through that patch of greenbrier. It doesn't really matter. You're going to get eaten up, And
right.
And he'll go. I just know like we'll go into stand locations. We'll literally walk the exact same path over and over again. And so I kind of just typically he like when we're walking together to stand to video hunt. I mean, he'll lead, and so I think that's one thing. But he is like hyper aware at all times. I will say, like he can literally like. I can't tell you how many times he'll be like, look at that rub over there. And it's like 60 yards through the high stem count, And I'm like, dude, I ain't seeing it, man. And we'll walk and I won't say anything, I'll be like, yeah, whatever. And then finally, like, we've been walking for like 15 seconds, And then there it is, like 20 yards off. And I'm like, holy smokes, dude. And then as soon as I like finally find the rub and I'm keying in on that, he's like, oh, look at this shed over here, and I'm just behind the whole time. So
it's all about smoke and mirrors, man. Just distract Tyler. That way I can actually find the sheds.
He found some big ones this year.
Yeah.
That's funny. So are you guys, is that in like areas of like high thermal cover, or is that like food sources or browse areas or what?
Well, if you talk about like Texas, where we're hunting, the eastern half of Texas, I can't tell you that there's a great correlation to anything. The only thing I could tell you,
thick.
Just it's going to be a thick area, and usually near bedding, but not like in bedding. Like for instance, a place that I've found a decent amount of sheds that's kind of strange is kind of some old regrowth from old pastures that's now just a huge thicket of like cedar elms and winged elms that are all, browse line. And I think what that is, it's just that's the time of year that deer are going in there and eating those buds on those elm trees, and it's just a huge food source, and that's why they're dropping in there. Mm-hmm. That's the only correlation I can really tell you for around here. And, well, I found sheds on fence crossings a few times too. But otherwise, that's about it. And I'm by no means do we find a bunch of sheds. It's just we're kind of like you. I don't think our deer densities are quite as low, but on public they're not very high. We've got these little pockets of deer, and usually it's around golf courses. But because people feed them.
That's no lie.
But in the country, out on public land and stuff, it's pretty low densities, and you know how it is trying to find sheds on low density stuff. What do y'all key on for sheds?
I mean, we try to focus, like in hill country, we try to focus on those southeast facing slopes. Yeah. Typically, that's where, they're trying to gain the thermal heat from the sun, or where they're exposed to the sun for the longest periods of time. So we try to focus our efforts in areas like that and stuff that has, like you said, high stem count for high thermal cover and browse areas. But, I don't know. Maybe we're just terrible at it. We just don't have very much luck.
Yeah. I don't know, man. Honestly, like anytime Tyler and I have gone shed hunting in Texas, we don't find much. Mm. It's just it's just a boots on the ground situation. So what we do to have the most success, kind of just post season, and really this is just all around hunting, is just hit the woods with backpacks and some water and some snacks and some trail cameras and just scout. And you'll find a few sheds one day. The next day you'll find a good place to put some cameras. Or the next time you'll find like a good spot to hang stands in November. You just can't. I think whenever you hunt terrain like ours, that isn't the stereotypical bed to feed, good ag field, high deer densities, you can't go out there with these really specific goals. You have to hit the woods with an open mind and take what the woods give you. And maybe I'm approaching that wrong. I don't know, but I just feel like if you're going to try to have some success and find something good, you got to have your eyes open to the good stuff all the time. You can't just be looking for buck beds all the time. You know what I mean?
That's a great point, man. No, I couldn't agree with that more. And we've kind of learned that lesson over the 4 or 5 years is, there would be days we would go in and say, hey, we're only going to go in and look for bedding. And then you get caught in these wormholes and, you might be focusing on travel corridors, or, you might find something down in the bottom that you have interest in. And at the end of the day, you're like, oh, I thought we were supposed to look for buck beds. And it feels like you've lost. But in reality, as you said, if you have an open mind and just take what the woods gives you, you're a lot more successful, and you feel like you've actually accomplished something at the end of the day. So that's an awesome point.
Yeah. No
That feeling of accomplishment doesn't come very often on public land, as you know. So when you get it, it's nice.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So do you see yourself going out of state anytime soon to hunt public, or are you like, I'm gonna kill a deer here and I'm going back to some cornfields in Ohio?
Yeah, I mean, we've, as far as, company wise, we have set aside some time to do a little more hunting this year. It's hard for us because we are a small company. There's 5 of us here, and my work ethic and my mentality on things is, if there's work to be done, you got to do it. And regardless of, what you want to do, like, you got to take care of the business. That's the baby. That's what's feeding your family. So a lot of times, I don't spend enough time, in the woods doing those types of things. So yeah, definitely have some things penciled in for the year. Gonna hunt turkeys in Ohio, public land.
Cool.
And then, when deer season rolls around, we're thinking about possibly Kansas, maybe Nebraska. And then I'd like to get down to Kentucky, and do some things.
Oh yeah.
Do some things across
Kentucky
the
looks awesome.
We saw deer all over the place whenever we were headed up for ATA this year. Like, we crossed the line into Kentucky, and it's like deer everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's some great pieces of public. 2 years ago, I spent some time in the Daniel Boone National Forest, which is in the northern eastern part of the state.
Yeah.
And it's just the terrain's super cool. So yeah, I definitely want to get down there.
Cool, dude.
Yeah, that's cool.
Well, it sounds good. So what's the best place for people to find out more about the render camera and whatever else you got going on?
Yeah, everything that we have going on, you can learn about on our website, ExodusOutdoorGear.com, Exodus Trail Cameras on Instagram and Facebook, and then there's lots of beneficial, informative blog articles on the website that talk about, we do our best to educate people on trail cameras, and not, the things that we do, they're not always hard selling. There's these devices, there's so much marketing jargon to talk across the industry and how these things are sold to people. A lot of people are buying products that they don't understand how they're built. So that's kind of our focus here at Exodus, is just, trying to educate people regardless of what camera or what company they decide to support.
Right. That's awesome, man. Well, we'll link to that in the show notes here. So if you're interested, make sure you go check out the show notes here below and find those links. Be easy for you. Chad, I appreciate the knowledge, man, and just the camaraderie that we kind of share around hunting big woods situations, man. It's we share the same struggle, man, and it's real.
I love it, man. I love it. Love what you guys are doing. I know that it almost feels like there's like 2 or 3 old kindred spirits like coming together whenever we chat. And we've only talked a few times, but love your guys' attitude and your work ethic and how you guys are doing things. So.
Yeah,
sure, man.
Thanks, brother.
Back at you, man, and I'm sure we'll be talking more throughout the spring. I hope you find a big shed, man.
You too.
All right, we'll see you, Chad.
All right, see you.
Well, like you kind of said in the intro, I think Chad is like a super relatable guy. Like, not everybody's going out and getting it done every year. I mean, we put a lot of time in this year. I felt like we have learned a lot over the last couple of years. And, we did have some public land encounters that kind of didn't go our way that were in bow range, but, here in our home state, there really wasn't a whole lot of encounters that were within bow range.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a couple maybe. And luckily one was a spike that you got to shoot, and so, I think that's like, I can relate to Chad personally. I'm sure a lot of the listeners can too. I mean, especially if you're that guy that gets 1 week of vacay, you know what I mean? So, it doesn't always happen for you. So don't be discouraged, let these stories, of these guys that we have on lift you up and let you know that, like, it's the process, right? Like, it's the process you got to fall in love with, and knowing that you're getting better every day and that you're going to eventually have that encounter. It just may take a little more time, another year or two,
Yeah, and do what makes you happy. If sitting over a corn feeder doesn't make you happy, even though you might have a chance to shoot a big deer, don't do that.
Yeah.
But if you want to do that, do it. And I think that's the thing, man, is people let media outlets, outdoor TV define what they think makes them happy, and instead go out and do what's fun for you.
Yeah. Oh, that's the way it should be, man.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going out and spending your hard-earned money that you have worked, 51 weeks for, 50 weeks for. I mean, go do what you like. Don't worry about what everybody else is telling you to do. So, I would say as we wrap this up, if you guys want to, if you haven't yet, if you want to give us a review on iTunes, that is super helpful for us. We can use all the help we can get. We're starting to get kicked back into the whitetail deer thing here. It's taken us a while. We've been since Christmas. We've kind of been just wanting to enjoy family. You've been wanting to work very hard.
Got stuff to pay for.
Yeah, and so anyway, we're starting to get back into this stuff. Hopefully you kind of find this stuff helpful. We've got more whitetail podcasts on the way. And, I mean, like I said, a review would be super helpful for us to keep exposing these guys that are just normal guys, everyday blue-collar type of guys like us. And like I said, don't forget, if you are interested in any of the camera stuff, Exodus has a lot of good info on just camera stuff. That's all, like he said, that's what they try to do, is help people out and help them understand cameras better and the technology that goes around it. They want things to be user friendly, so go check them out. The website's here in the links down below in the description. So anything else, Casey?
Go kill a deer, dude.
I'm gonna do it, man.
All
right, man. Well, y'all have a great week. Stay warm, God bless, and enjoy the outdoors. Remember, this is your element.
Live in it.
Hey everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. Meat Eater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the engineer's going to be there. Meat Eater Live headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay? Every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Art Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula. May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington. May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon. And May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.